Welcome to the Show Announcers Academy. This is a webinar series in partnership with Agricultural Shows Australia, and it's all about helping the next generation of agricultural show commentators pick up a microphone and head out into the show ring. It is supported by funding from the Australian Government, the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, as part of their Landcare Smart Farms capacity building program, because they appreciate the critical role that agricultural shows play in connecting farmers and consumers and city and country Australians, as well as bringing our rural communities together. Now, before I introduce our guest today to you, I want to drop one of the interesting statistics about agricultural shows in Australia that you might not know. According to statistics, 1 in 4 Australians attends an agricultural show each year. Now, it might be their tiny local rural show in eastern Western Australia or Western Queensland, or it might be one of the big royals in a capital city, but 6 million Australians at least attend an agricultural show every year. My guest today is Peter Heagney, and Peter, rather than me tell our viewers a bit about you, I'm going to lead you in with this line. I know that your professional career, for which you are very well known in horse circles, involved a microphone. Can you tell us a bit about that career?
Yeah, hi, Lindsay. Yes, well, I have been behind the microphone, I guess, for quite a long time. And as you say, part of my career as an auctioneer, I commenced originally with Dalgetty's, and then in turn, when they were bought out by Inglis, I continued my auctioneering career with Inglis. So it's been a career that's really spanned, heading towards 50 years now. Although interestingly, I actually started without a microphone. I started auctioneering, of course, in sale yards, cattle and sheep and pig sale yards, without a microphone. But it then evolved and developed. My family, or my father in particular, of course, was a racehorse trainer. In fact, he's an Australian Hall of Fame trainer. So horses were always in our family, and in some ways, it was just a natural progression to head towards the agency business and keep involved in the horse industry.
Now, as I've travelled around to some of the royal shows in Australia and gone back through the logs of history on winners in show rings, your wife's name frequently is on the honour roll for some of the major titles in equestrian competition in Australia, including the Gary Owen. Is she responsible for getting you to pick up a microphone on weekends at horse events or at royal shows?
Well, interestingly, no. In fact, obviously, when I say obviously, we did meet, of course, at shows. But no, I was heavily involved before Helen and I were married. I competed nothing to the level that Helen did in my early days in most aspects of equestrian sports. But no, I think I commentated for my first royal show in show jumping at Adelaide Royal Show, perhaps when I can't remember exactly, but maybe about 20. So quite young. But in those days, of course, we had to do everything. At some of our local shows, I'd course build, judge and commentate for the show jumping. So you had to be a jack of all trades. So no, despite Helen's obviously very strong involvement, I had been involved myself prior to Helen and I being married.
What are some of the shows that you have done? I know you've done quite a number of the royal shows. What are the shows you've been involved with?
Well, I have, but because my vocation, my business took most of my weekends with racing and other aspects of the English business, I didn't do a lot for quite a period of time. Having said earlier, I started at about 20 when I did the Adelaide Royal Show, did show jumping there. But I've commentated for a lot of different sorts of events. I've done the Gawler 3-day event. I've done Melbourne 3-day events, novelty events, what are now sport horse events. Commentated for dressage. I did a Benson and Hedges show jumping festival in Sydney many years ago now, a lot of years ago. But then I had an absence for a while, and as I say, my business didn't allow me the time to do so. So since then, I've got back in it and I'm doing a bit more and doing things I really enjoyed doing. Adelaide Show, obviously during COVID lockdown, we didn't have the time, or the events weren't occurring, and so we weren't able to do any of those. But yeah, Melbourne Show. I did Melbourne Show with the hunting and jumping events for quite a number of years before, again, I took an absence from there, but have been invited back to do so again. But it's a matter of now just fingers crossed that our shows, our major shows, are back happening.
You've had the benefit in many ways of having been a competitor and very much involved with sheep and cattle early on, as you said, and then with horses. So much of what goes on in terms of the competition that you need to communicate to an audience, you had some professional involvement with anyway, and so it was probably quite natural for you to talk about it. Many of the next generation of show announcers may not have that grounding that you've had. What would you say, or what would you give advice about in terms of how they prepare, in terms of educating themselves before picking up the microphone?
Yeah, interesting question, of course. I've always been a believer that in my auctioneering days, that a good auctioneer can sell anything, provided they do their homework. Now, obviously, you excel in certain fields and you have a natural flair if it's something in which you're interested. But if you're asked to auction any article, whatever it may be, and the same applies to announcing, I think if you do your homework, then you should be able to cope with almost any situation. So my suggestion, therefore, is that if you are anybody young person is interested in is announcing, certainly do their homework on the subject they're announcing about. Now, obviously, shows vary very much, and as a consequence, the commentary varies quite a bit too. For example, if you're commentating at a royal show, obviously it's a much bigger event. You need a much bigger, broader spectrum of things to talk about. Whereas if you're commentating at the local gymkhana, for example, basically you're calling competitors in and giving results. Pretty straightforward. But if you're going to go to a bigger event than that, then again, you have to do your homework, you have to do your research, and you have to know what you're talking about. But quite frankly, I think anybody who is serious about doing it can do so in any sphere, provided they do their basic groundwork and their homework on it.
My cheat or tip in terms of covering something that you're not totally au fait with or don't have a strong background is quickly identify 4 or 5 experts who are very charismatic and run around with a microphone interviewing them, because it's a great way to educate yourself on the run, but it does help to know a little bit about what you're covering before you go out there. I wonder, have you seen, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but have you seen any big mistakes or traps that announcers can fall into that you'd like to help the next generation of announcers avoid?
Yes, I guess I have over the years. One of the things that become very aware of is that you don't have to talk non-stop, and it's not a race. You just enunciate your words and speak clearly. I know, even again, back in my auctioneering career, in the early days, I used to go much too fast because it was assumed that auctioneers had to talk fast, when in actual fact, and it was Helen that said, whoa, slow down, you're talking so fast that nobody can really hear what you're saying. And it taught me that you do have to slow down a little. And the same, quite frankly, with announcing. It's not a race. You don't have to go at a million miles an hour, and you don't have to talk incessantly either. In fact, sometimes silence can be more impacting than talking. So I think that's something that young auctioneers or new auctioneers should be very mindful of.
It's interesting when you're announcing for the first time at a show, and I started out doing tiny little shows and volunteering for a decade. You do feel this pressure to fill the air because that's what you're there to do. You're the one with the microphone, and these days you're not expected to do the course building as well. So you've got the microphone with you and you're in your booth or you're out on the ground and you think, oh, I'm meant to talk all the time. But you're absolutely right, Peter. You just don't need to talk all day, and it is exhausting to do so because you'll often turn up at 7 a.m. with your first rider on course in the show jumping at 7:30, or the first ring event at 7:30, and then your fireworks may not be till 8:30 p.m. They are long days, and there isn't really a lunch break per se because there's lunchtime entertainment that you might need to commentate as well. What do you love about it? What do you love about show ring announcing?
Well, interesting. Having had a horse background, I love seeing the horse events and I love being part of the horse events. I've been on various committees over a period of time. I'm currently chair of Show Horse in Victoria, but I love being involved. Yeah, it's hard to answer, I suppose. What do you love about announcing? I'm not quite sure how one answers that. But having said that, I think if you do something that you enjoy, you do it well, whatever field it may be. I think that's quite important. I think, too, we get a fair variety of events, as I said earlier, and you're asking what young commentators, new commentators should consider. Because we commentate for a variety of events, then the commentary has to vary as well. For example, if you're commentating for a Grand Prix dressage test, it's going to be much more subdued than if you're commentating for the motorbikes jumping through the air. When obviously you do have to get animated. I must confess, I don't think I'm very good at that sort of thing. I'm much better at the more subdued type commentary. But you have to vary a commentary. You can't yell and scream and carry on when you're commentating for a show horse event, for example. But if you're commentating for the final round in a speed show jumping class and the last horse is going particularly fast, you obviously want to get animated and get the crowd involved. That's not necessarily the case in other events for which you're commentating.
Peter, have you always been really comfortable with, and your voice is so beautiful and unique, have you always been comfortable with the sound of your voice, or have you had to work on it?
Lindsay, to be honest, I hate the sound of my voice. I don't think I've got a terribly good voice at all. I concede, I've been told as much, but when I hear replays of my own voice, I don't like it at all. But no, I've been fortunate. If that is the case, if I happen to have a good voice, it's not because that has been trained, to be truthful. Look, not everybody has a John Laws or a voice like that, one of those wonderful, wonderful voices naturally. And I think you can train yourself to do so. But I think if you listen to a lot of people, and at least if you don't naturally have the good voice that maybe we all would like to have for announcing jobs, then I think if you listen to people and learn from other people and hear what they say and how they say things, then that will compensate a little for the fact that you may not naturally have a great voice.
Are there commentators, communicators, announcers or interviewers that jump to mind for you now who have been an inspiration or at least a guiding light in terms of what good commentary should sound like?
Lindsay Douglas, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yes, for sure. Look, there have been some great commentators over the years. I don't know whether you recall John Nash, who used to be the doyen of commentators at royal shows. John had a magnificent voice, and that aside, he was just a great commentator. So if there was anybody, yes, I would have to say it was he, quite frankly. Similarly, in my auctioneering career, there was a doyen of auctioneers in South Australia named David Cole many years ago, and I endeavoured to base myself on David Cole's, because to me he was just the pinnacle of auctioneers. And again, and I mentioned John Nash, and I mentioned somebody like John Laws simply because of the voice that he had, which we came to recognise so much on television and radio.
Now, there are going to be people watching this who have not done a show before, but perhaps have seen you announcing at a show, or they've been to the Sydney Royal, or they've been to the Perth Royal, or they've been to their local show and seen a stock and station agent do it, and they're thinking, I would love to have an opportunity to get on that microphone, but I certainly am not ready to just take over. What do you think the first step for that young person should be?
I think probably to spend some time to offer their services and spend some time in commentating or announcing box, or from wherever the commentator is doing his duty, and spend time with them. Just sort of get the feel of being there. Yes, there's a little nervousness. I mean, quite frankly, people used to say to me after my auctioneering career, after 50 years, do you get nervous? And it's probably not actually nervous, but if you don't have a little bit of an adrenaline rush, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, quite frankly. And a bit the same with commentating. You need to enjoy it. You need to really get the feel of it and to be part of it and want to be there and get engaged in the whole activity. And I think if young people actually spend some time with a commentator, then they should too get that feeling engendered through to them as well. But I think the first time I actually auctioneered thoroughbred horses, I was at sale in Western Australia, where I was based for a short time, and I was just up clerking alongside the auctioneer, who was David Coles at the time, and David was getting on a little in years that stage, and he just said to me halfway through the auction, "Okay, you take over." And I was totally unprepared for it. But having sold at that stage livestock for a number of years, at least the auctioneering side of it wasn't so very different. It was just purely adapting. Although interesting, he was actually selling standard breds at the time, which I didn't have much expertise at all. But nevertheless, if you're confident and you feel you can do it, then you can just take over. And I think a bit the same with the commentating. if somebody comes in and spends some time with the announcer, then they can do little bits and pieces just until they feel comfortable. There's nothing worse than throwing somebody in the deep end if they're not comfortable in taking over. So I think if they can do a little bit and feel comfortable, they're not going to be stuck there all day and have to talk all day and do the job ad infinitum, then they gradually adapt to it. Some people, I might add, are totally confident. And some people just do it without thinking about it. And they're the sort of people that we need to get engaged and get involved in our business. But if you're not that confident, please don't be deterred by not getting involved in becoming a ring announcer if you've got any interest at all.
You've just made me a little bit nostalgic about my first time in a show ring, which is at Camden Show. And John Nash, who you mentioned earlier, has the son, late now, Rory Nash, and his wife, Michelle, who are a brilliant duo in the show ring, and they brought their own charisma and flair. And they had just said to me, sit alongside us and we'll commentate, but very occasionally we'll say, Lindsay, tell us about one of our sponsors. And they coached me through how to look at some, relatively dull black and white copy from a, NAB or Combank or McDonald's. And actually they said, get rid of the script, look at it, but get rid of it, and then just have a bit of fun telling us about that sponsor. And it was such an easy and friendly way to sort of, dip my toes in the water and get a bit of an experience about the show. And being around them was just captivating. Peter, question for you. The most important or most memorable show announcing you've done, where would that have been and what was it?
Yeah, goes back for a lot of years. I had mentioned earlier the Benson Hedges Show Jumping Festival in Sydney. Now, obviously, it was sponsored by a cigarette company. That wouldn't happen these days, but that was a very, very major event. And for me to be invited from Victoria up there to do that in New South Wales, I was very happy to be able to be invited to do that. I enjoyed doing the Show Horse Nationals very much. I very much enjoyed doing Adelaide Royal Show, the whole commentary. Hitherto, I had principally done sections of a show. I mentioned earlier I'd done some show jumping in Adelaide. I'd done some novelty events. I'd done some hacking events. I'd done some parts of the 3-day event, but I hadn't done very much of the whole show. So Adelaide a couple of years ago was something I really enjoyed. Adelaide being my home state, it's a very friendly Royal Show, and so I really enjoyed it. I sort of felt quite comfortable in going back there and doing that.
It's interesting you mentioned novelty events. There's one thing I know about show societies, and that is they think if you have a microphone, you can talk about anything, and they will have no issue saying to you, are you covering the V8 utes right now, or are you covering the jumps, or are you covering and you just have to go with it. So being prepared very much helps. Peter, you need to go in a moment because you're getting ready for a horse show this weekend. Where is that and what is it?
It's a Werribee Park show. It would have been the event when the National Show Horse Championships were being held, of course, but unfortunately, due to COVID and lockdown, state border lockdowns, it was deferred, and it's now being held in March. So we're just running a show here in Melbourne at Werribee Park, a 2-day show, just to give people an opportunity to get out and compete. Well, the first day of it is an interesting one because the morning of the first day is devoted totally to off-the-track competitors. And the afternoon session of the first day is devoted to owner rider classes. So a little different. The second day is just a 2-ring open show.
Well, I hope your competitors have a wonderful time. I know Victorians are excited to be back out competing. They are sick of being without their shows. And Peter, I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for your time here today. It's been a joy to get to speak with you.
Thanks, Lindy. Really appreciate the time. And importantly, I hope we get some young commentators to come out of all of this.
Me too. Well, that's all for now here at the Show Announcers Academy in partnership with Agricultural Shows Australia. And once again, we wish to thank our funding partner, the Australian Government, Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, as part of their Landcare Smart Farms Capacity Building Program. And until next time, I hope to see you at a show around Australia very soon.